This recording is not mere entertainment. It is a harrowing testament, a warning steeped in dread. If you have stumbled upon this wretched audio, I implore you to cease your listening at once. The very air around you thickens with an oppressive weight, and should you perceive a whiff of ozone or hear an insidious hum that curls around the edges of your consciousness, know that the tendrils of the abyss have already begun to ensnare you. You are likely too late. The entity I have foolishly sought to unearth travels through the ether, whispering malevolently into the ears of those who dare to listen. It lurks, pulsating in the shadows, eager to entwine itself with your very essence. I record this in my final moments, a futile act of defiance against the unknowable. It is imperative that someone knows how I died, consumed by the cyclopean horror of Red Valley, where the ground itself breathes, and the trees weep with crimson. If you hear this, you may find yourself entangled in the same fate that now grips me, as the roots reach for my heart through the splintering wood. Yet, even as I feel the roots of despair encroaching upon my sanity, the impetus for my journey remains anchored in the realm of rational inquiry. It was but a serendipitous letter that first lured me into the shadows of Red Valley, a missive penned by a long-forgotten scholar Drive. Eliza Thorne, whose explorations into the peculiar fungus endemic to that forsaken place had promised revelations beyond the mundane. Her correspondence, yellowed and frayed, spoke of a discovery that eluded the grasp of conventional understanding, an organism that defied the very laws of nature, thriving in the decaying remnants of an ancient world. The dim light of my study, filled with the musty scent of tomes and the rustle of dust motes suspended in the air, had scarcely prepared me for the insidious allure of her findings. My skepticism initially shielded me, yet the tantalizing potential of a new paradigm in biological sciences began to gnaw at the edges of my reason. What could this fungal entity reveal about the very fabric of life and death? I recall the cold drafts that whispered through the cracked windows as I penned my response to her last desperate inquiry, an invitation to explore the veil, to pursue the knowledge that had slipped through so many fingers. The silence of the room now haunts me, a prelude to the horrors I unwittingly courted. The walls, adorned with shelves of Eldritch volumes, began to close in, as if the very architecture conspired to siphon away my resolve, propelling me toward the abyssal cradle of Red Valley. As the days unfurled, I found myself ensnared by an insatiable curiosity that compelled me forth into the depths of the unknown. The journey to Red Valley, one fraught with the weight of anticipation, bore with it an oppressive quality that I could scarcely articulate. As the train chugged away from the vestiges of civilization, the rusted iron tracks seemed to dissolve into a dreamscape, where the familiar contours of the world blurred, yielding to an encroaching wilderness that whispered secrets long forgotten. Upon my arrival at the periphery of the valley, an uncanny stillness enveloped me, a silence that felt almost sentient. The sun hung low in an overcast sky, casting a pallid light that seemed to struggle against the encroaching shadows. Trees twisted grotesquely, their gnarled forms reminiscent of some cyclopean architect's fever dream. The very air quivered with a damp chill, laden with the earthy scent of decay. My footsteps echoed, unnaturally, the rhythm distorted by the hollow resonance of the valley's odd acoustics. The ground beneath me, uneven and riddled with fissures, bore a curious texture, akin to the pulsating surface of an organism throbbing with latent vitality. Every creak of branch and rustle of leaves unraveled the taut threads of my rationality, and I could not shake the feeling that the realm of the living and the dead overlapped here, in ways both subtle and horrific. As I ventured further, I became cognizant of the encroaching twilight, the light retreating as if repelled by some unseen force. It was in this dimming illumination that I first glimpsed the oddities of the valley. Fungal growths protruding from the soil like the writhing tendrils of some eldritch entity. Their hues were grotesquely vibrant, a stark contrast to the muted palette of the surroundings, and I felt a chill race down my spine as I pondered the nature of these strange proliferations. They seemed to beckon, enticing yet foreboding, inviting examination while simultaneously stoking a primal dread within my breast. In that moment, amid the encroaching shadows, I could not shake the dawning realization that this valley, with its uncanny geometry and palpable strangeness, was no mere geographical anomaly. It was a crucible of the unknown, a place where the boundaries between the known and the unfathomable began to thin, and my heart quickened with both dread and anticipation, an omen of the horrors yet to unfold. As I pressed onward, the very soil beneath my feet seemed to pulse with an otherworldly heartbeat, a rhythm that both repelled and entranced me. Shadows danced erratically, twisted by the grotesque shapes of the flesh-like fungal growths which swayed as if in communion with a force unseen. Each step I took resonated with a peculiar squelch, the ground yielding underfoot like the flesh of a long-dead creature, and I could feel the dampness seeping into my boots, chilling my bones with putrid certainty. It was then that I perceived a sound, faint yet insistent, a low, thrumming vibration that seemed to emanate from deeper within the valley. The noise coalesced into an almost melodic cadence, a haunting lullaby that beckoned me closer, wrapping around my senses like a lover's embrace, promising secrets hidden beneath the veil of reason. As I trudged forth, the air thickened with an odor so foul it clawed at my throat. The stench of decay mingled with the rich, loamy scent of wet earth, creating a heady brew that intoxicated, even as it repulsed. The further I ventured into this accursed labyrinth, the more the landscape contorted before me. Trees stretched at unnatural angles, their trunks spiraling skyward in a non-Euclidean display that defied the very laws of geometry. My mind writhed against the assault of these absurdities, threatening to splinter under the weight of such alien architecture. I clutched my head, haunted by the realization that I had encroached upon a territory where the very fabric of reality wavered, where sanity was but a fragile facade. Through the oppressive twilight, I stumbled upon a clearing, its space rendered impossibly vast and disorienting. In the center stood a colossal structure, an edifice of mycelial growths coiling and twisting in a simulacrum of architectural grandeur. It loomed above me like a grotesque cathedral to some ancient and forgotten deity, a shrine to the Fungal God of Red Valley. The surface of this morbid monument pulsated with a ghastly vitality, the luminescent fungi casting an ethereal glow that flickered in unsettling patterns, like the writhing of a living thing. As I approached, the thrumming sound escalated, harmonizing with the heartbeat of the valley, an unbearably hypnotic hymn that thrummed within my very marrow. I could feel the dread coiling tighter around my heart, each pulse mirroring the cacophony of whispers that erupted from the depths of my mind, a chorus of voices urging me to delve deeper into the abyss. My hands trembled with trepidation as I reached out to touch the surface of the structure, my fingertips grazing the slick, gelatinous texture that seemed to ripple under my touch. But even as I made contact, the world around me began to unravel. The ground trembled with an unsettling fervor, a shudder that whispered of a world awakening from its slumber. The air crackled with a palpable energy, and I was suddenly acutely aware of the myriad of eyes that had turned upon me, beholding me from the chthonic depths of the fungal growths, their gaze 1,000-fold, a cacophony of hunger and malice that bore down upon my soul. In that moment of frigid clarity, I understood the grotesque truth of Red Valley. It was no mere geographical anomaly. It was a sentient entity, a being that hungered for understanding, for the essence of those who dared to tread upon its soil. My heart raced, a frantic drumbeat against the encroaching madness, yet I could not turn back. The ancient allure of the Fungal God held me in its insidious grasp, and I found myself teetering on the precipice of discovery, an existential dread spiraling deeper into the abyss, where knowledge awaited, knowledge that would unravel the very fabric of my sanity and bind me eternally to the horrors of this forsaken place. A tremor rippled through the ground beneath my feet, a pulse that resonated with the same rhythm as the throbbing heart of the Fungal God. The air, laden with the fetid aroma of rot and decay, thickened as if to suffocate me in its foul embrace. Each breath I took felt like an act of defiance against the overwhelming despair that seeped into my very being. As the structure loomed closer, the grotesque architecture twisted and coiled, distorting not only shape but also sense. An agony of perception that clawed at the edges of my sanity with every blink. The dissonant melody of the valley crescendoed around me, an unholy symphony of slithering whispers and squelching sounds that emerged from the depths of the Eldritch growths. I could almost discern fragmented phrases, hints of a language that twisted like the roots of the trees above, words that spoke of ancient rites and unfathomable hunger. They urged me to forsake my mortal ties, to surrender to the void, promising knowledge beyond the veil of human comprehension, yet delivering only the gnawing void of despair. I stumbled forward, my feet sliding through the damp earth, each step accompanied by the sickening sound of my soul squelching against the sodden ground, an echo of my own disintegration into this abyssal realm. The geometry of the clearing warped around me, angles bending in ways that my mind protested against, each sight a dagger to my reason as I clutched my head, caught in the throes of an unrelenting spiral into madness. And then the ground heaved, shuddering with a life of its own, as if the valley sought to consume me whole. I fell, hands sinking into the loamy, warm earth, an agonizing embrace that clung to my very essence. As I struggled to rise, the ground opened beneath me, revealing a chasm that appeared to breathe, an abyssal maw lined with glistening tendrils reaching out, beckoning me to join its grotesque banquet. In the haze of my despair, I glimpsed visions dancing at the periphery of my sight. Figures, shadowy and indistinct, moving with a fluid grace that defied the laws of nature. They coalesced into grotesque forms, each one a mockery of humanity, faces twisted in eternal agony, mouths agape in silent screams that reverberated within the hollowness of my heart. Despair blossomed anew. I was not alone in my torment, nor was I ever meant to be. A cacophony of laughter erupted from the shadows, a sound so alien and wrong that it set my teeth on edge, lacerating the fabric of my understanding. It echoed through the valley, a call that resonated deep within the very marrow of existence, chilling me to the core. The Fungal God, in its insatiable hunger, reveled in the fear that coiled around my heart, and I felt myself being drawn deeper into its grotesque embrace, one step at a time, like a moth to an abyssal flame. Desperation clawed at me, and I turned to flee, but the very earth seemed to conspire against my escape. The ground twisted and folded, roads vanishing into nothingness, paths leading me ever closer to the pulsating edifice. Reality itself was unraveling, the boundaries of my mind fracturing under the weight of the revelations that clawed at my consciousness. I could feel the very laws of nature breaking apart, the air thrumming with an energy that defied all logic. And yet, part of me yearned to comprehend, to decipher the eldritch truths that lay hidden within the fungal labyrinth. As I faltered, drawn back toward the entity, my thoughts spiraled into chaos, each revelation more suffocating than the last. The whispers intensified, chanting in a language that seemed to slither beneath my skin, promising enlightenment even as it enveloped me in the darkest shadows of madness. With each step, I felt the threads of my sanity unravel, tendrils of despair entwining around my mind. The Fungal God awaited, ancient and inscrutable, a being that reveled in the decay of understanding. I was but a vessel, a pawn in an unfathomable game played out over eons, and as I approached the heart of this malevolent domain, I could no longer discern where I ended and it began. The abyss beckoned, and I found myself teetering upon its edge, heart racing, mind fracturing, an echo of my own despair resounding through the cyclopean halls of the Red Valley. The chasm before me undulated with a sickening life, an ever-shifting void that seemed to pulse with an organic rhythm, drawing my very soul into its fathomless depths. The walls of this abyss were not merely rock, but an amalgamation of sinewy, pulsating flesh, slick with the viscous secretions of decay, releasing an aroma that was both fetid and intoxicating, a blend of sweet rot and the acrid sting of something ancient and mournful. Each inhalation came as a bitter reminder of my own insignificance, the air heavy with the weight of eons past, laden with the scent of countless lost souls who had ventured here before me. As I edged closer, the geometry twisted beyond mortal comprehension. Angles that should intersect instead spiraled off into infinity, and the very concept of up and down lost all meaning within this malefic space. Shapes flickered at the corners of my vision, non-Euclidean silhouettes that eluded definition, lurking within the shadows like monstrous memories refusing to fade. The ground trembled beneath me, a liquid mass, and I stumbled, my foot splashing into a puddle of warm, gelatinous substance that clung to my skin like the embrace of some long-forgotten nightmare. The laughter, once distant, now enveloped me, wrapping around my psyche like a shroud woven from the wails of the damned. It was a chorus of voices, each inflection a note in an eldritch symphony, mocking my fragility as I pressed onward, compelled by a morbid curiosity that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. They beckoned me deeper into the heart of the Fungal God's domain, where the very essence of reality seemed to dissolve into a miasma of despair, each heartbeat a reminder of my impending doom. Before me, an unholy altar of twisted mycelium rose, grotesque and pulsing as if alive, crowned with a profusion of luminescent spores that glimmered with the spectral hues of a sickened rainbow. The sight seared into my mind, a brutal testament to the unnameable horror that reigned in this forsaken valley. Tendrils of living fungus cascaded from the altar, undulating like serpents, and I watched, horrified, as they began to coalesce, forming a colossal figure that towered above me, a monstrous visage whose features defied description, eyes void of light, yet brimming with an intelligence that transcended humanity's darkest nightmares. The very fabric of reality quivered as it loomed, and a sound erupted from its ghastly mouth, a resonance that shook the ground beneath my feet, a sound that reverberated through the marrow of my bones, a cacophony that spoke of an ancient hunger. The walls of the chasm seemed to shudder in response, vibrating with a pulse that echoed my own frantic heartbeat. I was caught in the throes of a revelation, one that clawed at the edges of my mind, threatening to tear asunder the frail remnants of my sanity. In that moment, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, a maddening cacophony of truth that sought to unravel the very essence of my being. I could no longer discern the voices of the lost from my own thoughts, each syllable a blade carving deeper into my consciousness, promising enlightenment while ensnaring me in the web of the Fungal God's torment. I was drawn inexorably toward that unspeakable figure, a marionette compelled by the invisible strings of despair and curiosity as I teetered upon the precipice of oblivion, a single step away from merging with the abyss that hungered for my existence. And then, with a surge of chthonic power, the ground erupted around me, tendrils grasping, pulling, entwining, and as I fell into the maw of madness, I realized that I had become a part of something greater, something horrifyingly divine, a mere vessel for the Fungal God's insatiable appetite for knowledge, its grotesque banquet reveling in the dissolution of my being. I felt my consciousness fraying at the edges, each thought dissolving into a fog of dread as I struggled against the encroaching abyss. The tendrils coiling around me pulsated with an insatiable rhythm, echoing the heartbeat of the fungal god that now thrummed through my very veins. It was a grotesque merging, my essence entwined within the tapestry of decay that unfolded around me. In that suffocating embrace, the whispers intensified, coiling around my mind like a serpent tightening its grip. The knowledge they offered was intoxicating, a bittersweet elixir that promised revelations beyond mortal comprehension. Yet as I clawed at the remnants of my sanity, I understood the cost of such enlightenment. My thoughts would become the slithering tendrils of that abominable altar, an extension of its will, lost to the abyssal hunger that overshadowed my identity. The air thickened with the heavy scent of rot, an amalgamation of earth and decay that clawed at my throat. Each breath I drew was a sacrilegious act, for it filled my lungs with the spores of that loathsome deity, their insidious presence gnawing at my flesh and spirit alike. My body trembled, not with fear, but with the awakening of something primal within me, a yearning that transcended human emotion, a grotesque desire to merge fully with the fungal god and become a part of its unending cycle of life and death. Yet even as I writhed in this state of perverse enlightenment, a flicker of resistance ignited within the depths of my mind. I turned away from the siren call of that abomination, seeking solace in the dim sanctuary of my fading humanity. I had stumbled upon a hidden alcove within the cyclopean chasm, walls pulsating with a rhythmic undulation that mirrored my own frantic heartbeat. The geometry of this place warped and twisted, fractals of existence that danced before my eyes, each angle an affront to rational thought. I fumbled for a recorder, my fingers slick with the viscous substance that oozed from the walls, and I pressed the device to my lips, my voice trembling as I spoke. This is my final log. I am ensnared in an infernal embrace, a living testament to the fungal god's dread power. I cannot escape its grasp, nor do I wish to. Yet, I resist. I must resist. The horror of realization bears down upon me, a weight so profound that it threatens to crush my very essence. The altar calls, and I hear the laughter echoing in my mind, a cacophony of madness that surges like a tide, pulling me into its depths. The ground beneath me quaked, and a guttural sound erupted from the altar, reverberating through the very marrow of my bones. The laughter crescendoed, a chorus that enveloped my thoughts, drowning out reason, drowning out hope. Reality splintered as I glimpsed the grotesque shape of the fungal god through my half-closed eyes, its presence an unbearable weight that twisted the air around me into a suffocating miasma. Suddenly, the walls of this dim sanctuary shuddered, a low moan resonating through the chasm, as if the world itself protested my defiance. I felt the air grow dense, electric, with an impending doom that crackled against my skin. It was then that I sensed it, the presence of the fungal god drawing near, its insatiable hunger, igniting the atmosphere with a palpable tension. I could feel the tendrils reaching, probing, seeking. They slipped under the door of my refuge, slithering along the crevices, ever eager to pull me back into their monstrous embrace. I could no longer discern the limits of my own body, the boundaries of flesh and fungal horror blurring into a singular, grotesque reality. I was becoming something else, an amalgamation of flesh and the unnameable, a vehicle through which the fungal god would propagate its dread existence. As the door buckled under the weight of that ancient will, I realized that I was lost to the madness. My final scream echoed through the chasm, a wail swallowed by the insatiable darkness, and as the tendrils breached my sanctuary, I felt my mind unravel, consumed by the knowledge that would never again be mine alone. In this moment, I became the very embodiment of despair, a vessel for a horror far beyond my comprehension, waiting for the inevitable return of the Fungal God, now forever bound to its ghastly will. Comment now. I feel the shadows in Red Valley watching me.
Now tell me, what detail tested your sanity first? Drop it in the comments, then click the next video, because the veil opens even wider in our next descent into the mythos.